He's the tier 1 Ricky McKnight. Is this about the declassified UFO footage that the government released last year?
In early 2007, this silent black and white video was uploaded by a user on a conspiracy and UFO-centric forum called Above Top Secret. The user claimed the video depicted a disc-shaped UFO outmaneuvering a fighter jet somewhere off the coast of Mexico in the mid-2000s. They had supposedly gained access to the video while serving on board a US aircraft carrier and claimed to have smuggled a potentially classified material.
Hold on real quick, I want to send this to my dad. My dad loves UFO shit. Give me 1 second to send it to him. Okay, there we go. Thanks for the resub, Matt.
Off the ship. While some members of the forum chose to believe their story, others were not so easily convinced. For instance, the video was hosted on a website belonging to a group of German film students, which led some to denounce the clip as an attempted hoax. Even those who believed it could be genuine still complained that it was a totally uninspiring video of a fuzzy dot.
Thanks for the resub, David.
Over a decade later, this long-forgotten video suddenly resurfaced as part of an article by the New York Times. The video was now linked to a secret government-funded program and was even corroborated by a credible eyewitness. What had initially been dismissed as a hoax turned out to be real. The video was said to depict a genuine encounter between US Navy fighter jets and some sort of unidentified craft.
I just wish the video was better, because the video itself is pretty underwhelming.
A video of a similar yet completely separate incident was also featured at the beginning of the article, except this one had sound.
Dude, there's a drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
These two videos, along with a third released a few months later, spread across the internet like wildfire. Comment sections and discussion threads were dominated by unrestrained speculation about aliens and paranormal phenomena. The skeptics, meanwhile, took it upon themselves to analyze every pixel in every frame in the hopes of uncovering some
it does look fucking weird.
That could identify these fuzzy blobs.
It's like a Beyblade.
Any lingering doubts about the video's authenticity vanished with the release of an official statement by the Department of Defense confirming that the videos depicted real events involving unidentified aerial phenomena. So, what exactly are we looking at?
Let's read some Chillo Wisp. I'm super sorry to hear that taken. Well, I'm wishing her and your family the best, man. Good luck.
The first video was recorded off the northwestern coast of Mexico in late 2004. The story behind it has been recounted by more than a dozen naval officers, and it goes like this.
150 knots crosswind can make a plane go backwards.
A naval strike group led by the aircraft carrier the USS Nimitz was conducting pre-deployment exercises about 100 kilometers southwest of San Diego. Starting around the 10th of November, radar technicians aboard a guided missile cruiser, the USS Princeton, were puzzled by a series of unidentified radar tracks near San Clemente Island.
Thanks for the resub, official.
The tracks did not resemble any known aircraft and would sporadically appear in groups of 5 to 10 at a time. Suspecting a malfunction of some sort, the recently upgraded Spy-1 radar system was taken offline and recalibrated. Once the system was brought back online, however, the tracks had only become sharper. Among those on board were Senior Chief Operations Specialist Kevin Day, who was an expert on the Spy-1 radar system and had 18 years worth
Every
of
ship should have like an alien conspiracy theorist on it.
Day observed firsthand how these unknown targets alternated between slightly strange and physics-defying maneuvers. Sometimes a cluster of tracks would appear out of nowhere and slowly drift south. They were flying too high to be birds, too slow to be conventional aircraft, and did not follow any commercial airways. Other times, they would seemingly descend from space and drop all the way down to sea level in mere seconds.
Wow!
These phenomena continued for several days, and every time they reappeared, the crew would run up to the bridge and use a pair of heavily magnified binoculars to see these tiny
like a bird
specks moving erratically.
Yeah, like a bird.
On the morning of November the 14th, the crew on board the USS Nimitz were gearing up for a scheduled air defense exercise. They had not yet been informed of the unusual returns picked up by the Princeton. It was a cloudless day, and the sea was calm as pilots took to the skies.
Thanks to Prime Midnight.
One of them was Lieutenant Colonel Douglas Kurth, who
What's
was
up, Doug?
flying a single-seat FA-18 fighter jet when he was contacted by the Princeton.
Thanks to Prime
He
Midnight.
was instructed to investigate an unknown target approaching from the south. The Princeton also wanted to know if he carried any weapons, to which the answer was no. Kurth made his way to the specified coordinates, but did not pick up anything on sensors. As he looked down towards the ocean, however, his attention was immediately drawn towards a turbulent patch of water. Kurth claims to have seen a roundish disturbance on the ocean, which appeared as though something was submerged just below the surface. It reminded him of a submarine or ship slowly sinking into the ocean. The Nimitz strike group did include a nuclear-powered submarine named the USS Louisville. The Louisville was in the vicinity when Kurth made his observations, so the churning may indeed have been caused by a submerging submarine.
That
If not,
makes sense.
then whatever was in the water
But what if it was a
managed to evade
kaiju?
detection by the Louisville's extremely sensitive sonar. Kurth was soon joined by a squadron of 2 tandem-seated F-18s, the lead aircraft of which was piloted by Commander David Fravor. Much like Kurth, Fravor claims to have seen a disturbance on the ocean, which he described as having a vaguely cross-like shape. He thought it resembled a downed airliner.
It was
and
Jesus
described the
Christ
size
in his
as
space
much
vessel.
larger than a submarine. While Kurth eventually circled back for the Nimitz, Fravor and his wingman decided
Then
to get
all of a
close
sudden they
to
looked on their lap, and there was a piece
As
of
they began
toast
their descent,
with a
they
beard
noticed a white,
and long hair.
capsule-shaped craft moving erratically above the disturbance. At first, they thought it could be a helicopter, but there were no rotor blades. In fact, it was perfectly smooth. No markings, no exhaust, no protrusions of any kind. The UFO appeared to maintain a consistent altitude, but made rapid lateral movements with no visible means of propulsion. According to Fravor, it was a bit smaller than an F-18 and resembled a giant mint of Tic Tac.
What?
As Fravor continued to descend, his wingman
They're
decided
flying
to
around
maintain
in birth
altitude
control
and
pills
kept
in
watching from
space?
above. Flying in a spiraling downward motion, Fravor was getting closer and closer until suddenly the UFO realigned its axis and began to climb at an incredible rate of speed. Both of them were now flying in a circle. The UFO was coming up while the
What?
F-18 was going down. In an effort to close the distance between them, Fravor made a final aggressive turn before the UFO rapidly accelerated up to hypersonic speed and disappeared in a matter of seconds.
Why don't
As they
planes
looked
have a
down towards the
fucking
ocean,
video camera
it was
on
now
them?
perfectly calm.
It'd be so much easier to verify these things
Okay,
if the
but
fucking
what about
pilot
the
just had a
video?
goddamn
Well,
iPhone
so
attached to
Fravor
it somewhere.
and his wingman made it back to the Nimitz. They landed and ran into a different flight crew preparing to head back out. They told them what
They
had
do?
seen and
Then
to
why
be on the
wasn't it
lookout
turned
for
on?
anything out of the ordinary. Soon thereafter, another tandem-seated F-18
Thanks to Prime
took
Random
to the
stuff in the
skies.
resub Owen and
This
Dime.
time, it was outfitted with an advanced targeting forward-looking infrared camera system. This
Thanks,
at-flare
Dad.
pod is controlled
Thanks
by
for
the
the bits,
weapons
Ian.
systems operator seated behind the pilot, and the backseater of this flight was Lieutenant Chad Underwood. A few minutes after departing the Nimitz, Underwood detected something on his radar. The unknown target was directly ahead, a few tens of kilometers
It's on that
the target's
fucking
behavior was
infrared
erratic
camera
and
or whatever, and it looks
unpredictable.
like shit.
Its
The
altitude and
AC-130
airspeed were in
cam
constant
looks like
flux.
shit.
According to Underwood, it simply did not abide by the known laws of physics. At some point, Underwood managed to get a lock on the target with the at-flare camera, and this is when the much publicized video was recorded.
See,
At
like,
the
it looks
beginning
like
of the
dog
video,
shit.
We see a UFO being tracked in infrared.
Just
Underwood
show me
then
a
switches to
fucking
visible light,
clear video.
revealing an out-of-focus, rounded mass in the distance. He then switches back to infrared and alternates between 2 different zoom levels on multiple occasions. Not much happens until the very end of the video, when the UFO suddenly disappears off to the left-hand side of the screen. As the target was too far away to be seen with the naked eye, neither Underwood nor his pilot ever made visual contact. The Princeton continued to detect anomalous radar tracks for at least 2 more days, and according to Senior Chief Day, they eventually disappeared near the Mexican island of Guadalupe.
Hold on, I need some water. I love this shit though. I've always had a big fascination with UFOs and aliens and all that. I'll be right back. And thanks to the Prime Big Nut. Oh shit. Thanks to the Prime
In
Lucid.
complete isolation, utterly divorced from any and all surrounding context, this video is extraordinarily unremarkable.
Agreed.
It's a fuzzy blob against a featureless background. It's only when you place it in the middle of these truly remarkable stories that the video itself becomes remarkable. When skeptics and debunkers claim that this is a distant airplane, I understand why many are so opposed to that explanation, because the witness accounts say otherwise. A distant airplane can't just zip around the sky as if gravity was non-existent. It doesn't make any sense. Unfortunately, we don't see any of those physics-defying maneuvers in the video. In fact, this fuzzy blob does not do much of anything until the very end, when it suddenly disappears off to the left-hand side of the screen.
Yeah, it doesn't even disappear
some claim
fast.
This is due to a sudden acceleration by the UFO, but it could also be something as simple as the camera losing its target lock. It's difficult to tell.
True. Thanks to resub Habla
Underwood
and
himself
Soup.
is uncertain about what happens at the end, as he never made visual
That would be
contact.
cool looking.
The witness accounts, meanwhile, are so extraordinary they are difficult to believe. If any regular person claimed to have seen a tic-tac-shaped UFO moving erratically in the sky, a few would listen. But when that same story is told by some of the most qualified observers on the planet, it makes you wonder. And it wasn't just 1 or 2, these UFOs were either seen or tracked by dozens of experienced aviators and sailors for nearly a week. They were seen from multiple vantage points and tracked by one of the most sophisticated radar systems in the world. To think that all of them are lying or all of them were deceived by some prosaic phenomena seems absurd. At the same time, there is no way to verify what they're saying. We have no choice but to take them at their word. We don't have the radar data, the radio communication logs, nor any corroborating evidence. Well, except for this pixel-deficient footage, I guess. Some of the witnesses claim there was actually a much longer and much higher resolution video than the one we see today. They claim to have seen this video on board the Princeton, and that the shape of the UFO was perfectly clear as it violently maneuvered around the screen. What's interesting about this claim is that when the video was first leaked online back in 2007, the anonymous leaker claimed they had 4 different versions of the video in their possession. 2 of them were said to be shorter, but the 4th was said to be twice as long and supposedly showed more UFO movement. Unfortunately, this extended version has never seen the light of day.
Until
and if some
now.
of the witnesses are to be
I'll
believed,
release it if
likely
we get
never
200k
will.
viewers
you see,
right
on the
now.
evening of November the 14th, all the footage and data from these events were supposedly erased. Witnesses claimed that 2 men arrived via helicopter who then collected the relevant data before having all the tapes and hard drives wiped clean. Witnesses from both the Nimitz and Princeton
Do you think if
recall
there
such a
was
visit
alien
and
visits,
insist that nothing like it had
it
ever
really
happened
wouldn't
before?
leak?
This has
I genuinely
understandably led to
find that hard to
speculations
believe.
of some
I feel
sort
like
of
it'd have to
cover-up,
leak.
that these sightings were that of top-secret military drones or aircraft. While the US military is undoubtedly experimenting with all kinds of cutting-edge technology, it is difficult to believe they possess gravity-defying, hypersonic flying tic-tacs. If so, they would possess technology so far beyond anything known to the public, it would be akin to magic. And this was back in 2004.
It has leaked, we
Don't
just
get me
don't
wrong,
believe it.
2004 was a
No,
magical time
I
compared
don't.
to
I don't think that's.
but it was
that's
still
it.
aggressively 2004.
Flat ball. From a disc to a ball right before your eyes. Catch it, flatten it, and let it fly. Flat ball.
Flat ball
I really
was
don't
pretty
know
cool.
what to make of this story. After reading, watching, and listening to so many interviews with the people who were there, I'm left with a distinct impression that they're telling the truth. The video, on the other hand, does little to support their claims. Sure, this fuzzy blob may be unidentified, but it's not unexplainable.
Do people really think if aliens exist, they can travel at light speed? They don't have the technology to not be seen?
The second and third videos were recorded off the southeastern coast of the United States in early 2015.
It's not exactly the same thing. Invisibility and speed don't go hand in hand.
Some of their crewmates and fellow pilots have, and according to them, the story goes like this. In the summer of 2014, a naval strike group led by the aircraft carrier the USS Theodore Roosevelt was conducting pre-deployment exercises somewhere off the coast of Virginia. Much like with the Nimitz encounters, the first sign of trouble came in the form of anomalous radar tracks. Following a fleet-wide upgrade of aircraft radar systems, pilots had begun to pick up unidentified targets while conducting routine training missions.
Doesn't the universe expand faster than the speed of light? I see a lot of people again spamming that it's impossible to travel faster, which, I mean, obviously current understanding would say so, yeah. But doesn't the universe expand faster than the speed of light, or does it expand at the speed of light? Let's see. Oops. Okay. Not super helpful. Let's ask this a little better. Okay, so the universe expands faster than the speed of light, but nothing in it does. So what the fuck? How does... It's such a baffling concept. Very interesting. So how the fuck can the universe go faster than the speed of light with its expansion, but the things that are left in it aren't traveling at that speed? Yeah, if only Yahoo Answers could solve this for me. Crazy. Exit Tier 1,
the tracks
Amelia.
were initially dismissed as false positives, but their behavior was unlike anything they had seen before.
True, Rope.
Gravity-defying maneuvers, hypersonic velocities, and other mystifying shenanigans. Attempts to intercept these UFOs were initially unsuccessful. Lieutenant Danny Acoin claims that on 2 separate occasions he tried, but failed to make visual contact. Then, one day, a squadron is said to have narrowly avoided a mid-air collision with one of these UFOs. The 2 jets had been flying in tandem, no more than a few tens of meters apart, when something flew right in between them.
What was that, the
that
box
something
ghost?
Was oddly described as a cube encased by a translucent sphere.
What?
Lieutenant Ryan Graves, who spoke to one of the pilots once they had landed, claims the experience had visibly spooked them. So much so, the squadron filed an official safety report. According to Graves, this was far from an isolated incident. These UFOs were allegedly seen by dozens of pilots for several months and could remain airborne for up to 12 hours at a time. Yet, despite growing concerns among the Roosevelt crew, training missions continued as if nothing was amiss. By early 2015, the Roosevelt strike group had made its way down to the coast of Florida, which is when the 2 now famous videos were recorded, both of which are said to be short clips taken from much longer and higher resolution footage. We don't know much about the circumstances as the officers involved have
So this
chosen to
happened
remain
near
silent,
Florida?
but
Are we sure it wasn't just like a meth addict who made a homemade plane and all of the jerky movements are him crashing?
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating.
So, there are a few things to unpack in this one. If we ignore the audio for a moment and focus solely on the visuals, the thing that immediately stands out is the apparent rotation of the UFO.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I use the word apparent because some debunkers claim that this rotation is an optical illusion.
Fuck.
You see, the Atflare pod is equipped with something known as a derotation mechanism. It's meant to counteract the rotation of the camera so that the orientation of the image stays the same, also known as image stabilization. What may not be stabilized, however, are certain artifacts produced by the lens of the camera. You can even try this yourself. Aim a camera towards a light source, rotate the camera, stabilize the footage, and there you go. The orientation of the image is preserved while these spokes of light rotate along with the camera. So much like how the light from this light bulb is producing a lens flare, the infrared radiation from this UFO is said to be producing a lens glare. In other words, the bunkers claim it is the camera and thereby the glare which is rotating, not the UFO itself. While this explanation
you
seems
ruined
perfectly
Christmas then.
reasonable to
Fuck
my
you.
untrained
I thought that was
eyes,
cool.
Things get a bit more confusing once we bring back the audio.
Well, if there's like, look at that thing. It's rotating.
If this rotation is merely the result
Thanks to
of
Prime,
image
Miss
stabilization, why
and the
would the two
resub
pilots fail
JHBT,
to recognize it as
the
such?
resub Fran, the
Surely
resub
they, if
Faku.
anyone, would know what that looks like. And they're not alone. Both Lieutenant Graves and Acoin believe it is the UFO which is rotating. Furthermore, an expert on the ATFLIR system has very plainly stated that this is not an optical illusion. But this is not the only puzzling comment made by the two pilots.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
So the radar is supposedly detecting a whole fleet of UFOs, which are all traveling crosswind. I mean, if what
Can't
we're
click
looking
links, by
at
the
is
way,
something
Fanta.
prosaic, like the blooming exhaust of a jet engine, these comments don't make a whole lot of sense. I would love to hear what these two pilots have to say if they ever decide to come forward. Until then, all we can do is speculate.
Thanks for the 5 gift subs again, Syaxis. Appreciate the generosity.
Echo 6-1 Tango, Roger, oh, got it! Woohoo! Roger, there's troubleshooting machines out here. Did you box moving target? 602. No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at it fly!
That's definitely a
This
kid who
video
just
may
got his
seem very
superpowers.
striking at
That's like the
first,
first
but
thing anyone
it is
that can
arguably
fly
the
would do.
least interesting of the three. Once again, let's ignore the audio for a moment and focus solely on the visuals. Unlike the previous two, the UFO in this one is colder than its surroundings, so the ocean below is radiating more heat than whatever this is. It may look as though the UFO is traveling at high speed, but this is likely the result of parallax. In short, aircraft go fast,
Thanks resub Danny. The
camera
Prime
fixed
slick.
on not so fast UFO appear to go fast.
Interesting, Naruto.
Some say the UFO is near sea level and therefore the parallax explanation doesn't work, but we can actually derive its altitude using the numbers on screen and find that that is not true. Everything seen in this video is consistent with a balloon or some sort of debris floating in the wind. The commentary by the pilots, however, does once again introduce a bit of confusion. I mean, it seems odd for the pilots to be so excited over something so mundane, but without hearing from the pilots themselves...
Maybe the
we can do
pilots are
nothing
just fucking
but
dumb.
speculate.
Like, you know, it's totally possible. We can fly a plane, but we're also kind of fucking dumb. We don't know what it looks like when a grocery bag gets picked up by a strong wind. You know, I can't rule it out.
The person responsible for making these videos available to the public is a man named Lou Elizondo. Beginning in 2008, Elizondo was the head of a secret government-funded effort to investigate UFO sightings known as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. By late 2017, however, Elizondo had grown so disillusioned with the government's lack of interest in the program's efforts that he decided to resign. In his resignation letter, Elizondo writes that certain individuals within the government are staunchly opposed to UFO research, that inflexible mindsets and political contention essentially prevented him from doing his job. He portrays the government as virtually unconcerned about an issue which he believes could pose a threat to national security, so much so that he felt it necessary to resign in protest. This seemingly uncaring attitude was also noted by witnesses of both the Nimitz and Roosevelt encounters.
Once we were in
For
the
instance,
road and
Lieutenant
saw a
Ryan
diaper
Graves
flying in the
recalled that
air.
commander
Must
of the
have been that,
Roosevelt
and just
strike
didn't
group
stop
seemed
flying.
completely unfazed
He
by
cracked
this
it.
video.
That's probably what it
On the
was.
day when it was captured, he supposedly looked at it for 5 seconds, then walked away without saying a word. Some of the senior officers on board the Nimitz and Princeton are said to have had an equally muted response. These are very bizarre reactions to potential airspace incursions. You'd think they'd want to make sure these UFOs are not some kind of threat. The near mid-air collision reported by one of the squadrons from the Roosevelt seems especially concerning.
Not really concerning, it was just, it had a mission.
Many point to the severe stigma surrounding the topic of UFOs. Regardless of how inaccurate it may be, the term UFO has, for many, become synonymous with aliens.
God damn right.
So much
bet
so,
your
the
sweet
government
ass.
now favors the term UAP, specifically to avoid this unwanted association. Whether sightings go unreported or uninvestigated, the argument is that people choose to look the other way because they're concerned about their reputation. No one wants to be seen as a nutcase and potentially lose out on a promotion.
Makes the bits ash
Others believe there could be something a bit more conniving at play, that no serious action is taken because a highly advanced and top-secret drone program is responsible for the sightings. Even some of the witnesses have entertained that possibility. For instance, Sean Cahill, who was the chief master at arms on board the Princeton, perceived the inaction of senior staff as a clear sign that the UFOs were known military assets. But as previously mentioned, it is difficult to believe such radical innovation could have taken place in absolute secrecy. We're talking about such advanced technology,
I don't think
it
so,
would barely
Gordy.
make sense in a science fiction novel. Vehicles that
That's
can exceed
crazy,
the speed of
Pepin, yeah.
sound without producing any
Time
sonic
flies.
booms. Vehicles that can drop or climb to virtually any altitude in a matter of seconds. Vehicles that can violently change direction of travel as if inertia was a mere suggestion. None of that should be possible, yet dozens of trained observers claim they witnessed the impossible. The least uncomfortable solution, therefore, is to simply not believe them. Sure, the witnesses are credible, but they're not incontrovertible. Everything from optical illusions to faulty equipment could be used to cast doubt on their extraordinary
ninth
tales.
vessel in the Prime
And without
Legend.
any corroborating evidence, except for this nebulous footage, that is not a difficult task. As such, many government officials may not seem concerned because they genuinely believe there is nothing.
I have
to
an
be
alien
concerned
story.
about.
I'll tell it in a second. Not the one I told last time.
Personally, I'm left feeling very
Thanks for your sub,
conflicted.
Empress.
On the one hand, I find the witness accounts quite compelling. On the other, I find this grainy trilogy of dots in the sky somewhat underwhelming.
Agreed.
Sure, the videos are fascinating, but they're also far too ambiguous to provide any decisive answers. I highly recommend that you seek out and listen to some of the witness accounts so that you can
Favorite
judge for
monster
yourself.
truck? I'm not sure. The one that did a front flip.
This is very much a developing situation. By the time you watch this video, chances are more information will have been released.
Nope.
According
None.
to Elizondo, the Nimitz and Roosevelt encounters are just the tip of the iceberg. Sightings by military personnel are said to be commonplace, it's just that we rarely hear about them. I can only hope that more evidence is released in the near future, and that at least one video depicts something inexplicable. Something that is unidentified because it defies explanation,
Yeah,
not
that'd be
because
cool.
it's too distant, too small, or otherwise too obscure. No, but something truly extraordinary.
That's sweet,
That's what I
Buttercup.
want to see.
That was a cool video. So, like I said, my dad is super fucking into this alien shit, and I've told this story before, but a long time ago, my mom and dad were friends with a really high-ranking officer in the U.S. military, and the guy was fucking wild. So, I mean, the guy's real. Like, I even looked into him to make sure that, like, they didn't just get scammed or something. So the guy, I won't drop his name for obvious reasons. He was like a really high-ranking military guy. It's hard to like explain the story without like fucking giving away the guy's info. He was like the head of a very big air base, and when he retired, dude got kind of big into the alcohol. and he would give away like a lot of shit that he probably shouldn't to my parents. Some of it like standard war shit. But then like my dad, being as curious as he was about aliens, would always bring up like UFO shit and alien shit. And I don't know if he was just fucking with my dad, but he would always like go down that path. He'd be like very serious and be talking about like how he has had encounters with UFOs and that the government tries to keep it under wraps and that he's seen actual wreckage and shit. So ever since that, my dad has been super fucking adamant that they are real and that the government keeps them under wraps. I think that the family friend was just fucking with him, but it is something interesting to think about. Thanks to the resub, famous ladies man in the prime braid. If he wants to talk about it, I'd fucking love to interview him about it. My dad has told me that shit constantly. Actually, I think he's dead. Is my dad still awake? Let me ask if the guy died. He retired because it was like he suffered some kind of injury or some shit. I'm texting my dad real quick. Yeah, I started Invincible. It's pretty good. Thanks to the resub, ambidextrous. Aliens got him. Nah, he suffered some kind of injury at one of the bases or some shit. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've heard the story, like the full story. Thanks to Tier 1 Viking and the resub Rubhub. And the resub Perpetual Retrograde Jackie and the Prime Play Stuff. Alright, cool. Hold on, he's still awake. I'm gonna call him real quick. I'll be right back. Give me 1 second. Thanks to resub Godslayer. Yeah, the guy I was talking about passed away. Would have been really cool to fucking ask him about it, though. Thanks to the resub Phoenix. Night, Christopher.
A weekly internet show, The Atheist Experience has run for over a decade, and generally sees the host debate with various callers over different religious methods. However, during a seemingly regular, if not slightly intense call in 2014, there was a sudden bizarre and downright chilling moment live on air.
That's just a silly argument. I mean, I understand.
I agree with you. I'm just trying to get at why it's a silly argument.
Well, I understand that that statement was originally said by Carl Sagan, but who really cares about, them requiring extraordinary claims and evidence?
So then you should believe I rose from the dead. Okay. I terrified her with my awesome logic.
Apparently.
That's the creepy, mysterious moment?
As heard, while the hosts argue with the caller, she abruptly lets out a blood-curdling scream, and before we can hear any more, they disconnect the call.
What?
Disturbingly, the screams sound uncomfortably real, as though the woman was actually attacked. In fact, many viewers were so convinced the call was genuine that they asked the show to track down the woman's address. Others though aren't so convinced, and contend the scream was merely a sound effect.
Belarus.
Still, is it possible the woman was literally murdered on air?
Okay.
What the fuck? Oh my god.
A reality series is one of the last places you'd expect to find credible proof of life after death. However, one Big Brother contestant allegedly heard the voice of her dead sister.
Ué, eu ouvi meu nome.
What?
Cida? Cida? Aonde?
This is a mysterious video?
Aonde?
I think he was just happy to be watching some Brazilian Big Brother here.
Still, the mystery seems over when a fellow contestant claims responsibility.
I'm just gonna skip through this. I think it's just this guy being horny.
In the previous look at mysterious videos, I covered a plane supposedly frozen in the air. To some, this was evidence of the simulation theory.
Thanks to some
While for
Chris Crabbe
skeptics,
and
it was just the wind.
Ghetto Works.
However,
and
either
the Dollar
way,
Astro.
these so-called glitches in the Matrix not only affect aircraft, but also apparently birds. Now, admittedly, most of these videos are easily explained as normal hunting behaviour. Yet what if the bird was dead, and still somehow floating?
What is it? What is it? Can you see it?
This is an old patch. Yeah. Just a bit of lag. Desync.
What the hell is that?
According to one onlooker, Nino Tobrak-Kojan, he watched it for at least 2 minutes, but saw no movement whatsoever.
2 minutes?
Unsurprisingly,
he drove right by it.
Has itself led to stranger theories. The common consensus is that it's proof of the aforementioned artificial reality, but alternative bizarre ideas claim it's a government drone, or even a broken alien device. Leave your own theories in the comments.
What the hell is that?
Yes, a broken alien device is pretty reasonable given all the evidence. Thanks to the resub Arisen and Detergent.
If you've spent any time in conspiracy circles, you've likely heard of the chemtrail theory. The idea is that many contrails are actually filled with undisclosed chemical substances.
They're making our dicks
These
smaller.
chemtrails then slowly poison the atmosphere with the overall purpose of human population control. However,
it's clearly
an
not
additional
working.
And downright bizarre theory posits that said chemicals are released via cloaked government planes. Now, obviously this sounds ridiculous, but believers have offered up some weird videos. Incredibly, on July 17th, 2019, Skywatcher Eye of the Beholder filmed this unexplained anomaly in Bucharest,
Sweet, thanks,
Romania.
Eris. Yeah, I know, I love these things, Mafia. Thanks to the resub, Maddie. And yeah, True Cult.
Still, you might say this was just an optical illusion, yet 2 days before this video was released, amateur researcher Linda Miller captured another one of these planes.
Thanks to the resub, Varus. Looks pretty good. I can't,
So could
yeah.
the impossible be true?
There we go.
And the government actually use invisible planes?
Thanks to the resub, Clorox and the Prime Stick.
Hidden in the remote Monitor Valley of Nevada lies the boiling hot spring Diane's Punch Bowl. Such extraordinary heat has led to the alternative name Devil's Cauldron. But
I've
could
heard of
there be
that.
an additional and darker reason for this?
Oh.
One person who may have stumbled upon the answer is the channel Texrax. For years, they've tested the durability of multiple pieces of technology via different extreme situations. As such, the boiling cauldron was a perfect place to test the survival capabilities of the iPhone 11.
Okay guys, so check it out.
Thanks to resub, Otis.
We're gonna slowly but surely dip it straight in the water.
Still, the
Alright, I'll check it
experiment
out.
seems like a flop with Texrax's first test.
Thanks to Prime Veronis.
However, the second time Texrax drops the phone, he captures something truly chilling.
Wow, what the fuck? It's demons!
Texrax himself is at a loss to explain the screams, but this hasn't stopped his viewers from claiming the cauldron is actually a portal to hell. Now, obviously this theory is speculative at best, but there's no doubt the sounds are unusual, So what's really the answer? Be sure to let me know.
It goes to hell. What do you mean? We got the answer. What the fuck are you talking about? You heard the screams. Demons are always screaming in hell.
In the world of UFO research, some self-proclaimed hunters often analyze.
It's not the drone. It was fucking demons.
Unfortunately, for the most part, they're left with blurry pictures of normal space phenomena.
However,
every now and then, the cameras pick up something that shouldn't be there.
In the prime,
the most recent example of this was on February 19th, 2020, when ufologists spotted this bizarre object.
I'm sorry to hear that, Bear. We'll do the Ghost of Camel in just a moment. I'm busy being enlightened. Thanks, resub Crimpy.
Incredibly, based on its size compared to that of the nearby planets, the UFO appears to be massive on an unprecedented scale. Still, despite such inspired speculation, NASA claims the artifact anomaly is actually an internal reflection of Venus. Intriguingly though, researchers have noted the UFO's similarity to Ezekiel's wheel, long suspected to be proof of the ancient alien theory.
Yep, that's what I was thinking too.
The Bible claims the prophet was visited by a flying chariot, yet others believe it was a spaceship. No doubt this sounds like blatant pseudoscience, except the idea was surprisingly correlated by NASA chief Joseph Blumrich. So is the solar anomaly proof that Ezekiel's wheel has returned? Or was it really just a reflection of Venus?
No, it's Ezekiel's wheel. Like, you can't argue with that. Look at that shit. It's like a fucking Beyblade over there.
If this year didn't feel apocalyptic enough, some believe a dragon has now been filmed in China. In a scene sensationally described as hell on earth, a sudden explosion recently hit the Tiexi district of Shenyang. Officially, it was the result of a lightning strike. However, many are convinced it was some type of plasma weapon, and even weirder still, that it had a connection to this flying creature.
Wow. It's always so convenient that someone's like looking in the correct direction to catch something like that in a totally innocent, nothing going on kind of day. I always just find that really lucky, just how lucky we are to get those kind of angles, because he's clearly holding his phone. He just decided to start recording while driving over by those buildings doing nothing.
Like a dragon silhouette behind the apartments. Covered by multiple cameras, skeptics have claimed it's merely a piece of plastic debris, yet it seems to flap its wings.
That was sweet there. No, I think it's
is
just.
It possible
I don't
that
think so.
anomaly really is some unexplained creature? And if so, why was its appearance perfectly timed with the explosion? Is this proof they're related, or was it just a bunch of debris and a few coincidences? What's your opinion?
I think it's a dragon. I mean, what the fuck else could it be?
A video that bears unnerving similarity to that of the frozen bird clip. This was taken back in September 2019. Posted to Facebook by Morgan Lyons, she supposedly stumbled upon this crowd of seemingly frozen people. This is definitely weird enough, but even stranger, there'd been nobody there 10 minutes earlier.
What the fuck is happening?
Holy shit. The NPCs, their code is fucked up.
Gotta go. Get me out.
Now, this is certainly mysterious, but could there be a simple explanation? According to some comments, the group is a class from Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditation retreat, in which participants stand completely still in order to become fully immersed in the experience. However, others remain skeptical of this and question why they would freeze in such uncomfortable positions, as well as why some members are stood nowhere near each other. Additionally, viewers state that they couldn't all stand still without at least some instance of movement. So, if the people aren't from the meditation retreat, could it perhaps be an elaborate prank? Or, as a few far-out theories postulate, further evidence of the simulation hypothesis?
I think simulation.
Gotta go. Get me out.
You didn't see one moving. That was an illusion to hide the malfunctioning simulated
Earlier this
universe.
year, the city of Bryan, Texas was rocked by a horde of banshee-like screams, and although officials blamed a pressure release valve, many residents are
Hey, I have
convinced
seen
of
that
an
phase, and thank
otherworldly
you.
explanation. One of these
Thanks
is
for
Daniel
so
Robb,
cool.
who was one of the first to record the screams. According to Robb, they apparently started around 8:30 in the midst of an unusually powerful thunderstorm, and continued for an hour.
There's a sound screaming, it's like a scream. It's so freaking loud, and it's coming from up in the air, like up there. It's been going on now.
Jesus.
What is that? I swear I saw like this thing when the lightning was flashing a second ago. What the fuck?
This one was a real thing? What did it
The
turn out to
screams come
be?
in fairly regular intervals, with an odd mixture of vibration sounds and shrieks. Most inexplicably, they seem to be extremely loud, and yet somehow far in the distance.
That is so loud and so, like, eerie. It's like a banshee, blood curdling.
So what did it turn out to be then, if it's real?
There it is again.
It's Zapdos? That's kind of what I was thinking.
What is that?
Fortunately, however, resident Rusty Eppolito was able to get a much more close-up recording. Unfortunately, his video only makes the screams that much more creepy.
Uh-oh. Oh, is that... I think it's a fox that makes a fucking super loud scream, right?
With an animalistic cry.
Is that a fox or
While
something?
around
What
the
am I
same
thinking of?
time, there are a series of mysterious blue flashes. Eerily, these screams sound like they're coming from something alive, and not
Mountain
an object,
lion?
as others speculated.
Thanks to resub Maddie.
So what was responsible?
True boom, it could be.
For now we don't know, but the answer probably lies in Rob's other two videos. Interestingly, the earlier clip shows the Air Force responding to an unidentified object, in the exact same location where he later captured the screams.
Yes, it was probably an alien spacecraft screaming.
Meanwhile, in the latter piece of footage, it looks as if Rob potentially captured said object.
It's coming from up there. See that thing in the sky? Flashes?
Thanks to resub Sunbro, Neptune in the Prime Atrium.
What was this UFO? A weather modification device as has been suggested? Or is there a more darker outlook?
It's not a cloud. It's a witch. So what does a mountain lion scream sound like? Well, that almost immediately replicated that. That took the quickest YouTube search of all time. That's pretty fucking close. What does a fox scream sound like? I know these screams are fucking crazy. Nice. This one? Yep. I think it was probably a mountain lion. This is probably filmed on the same night that that guy was losing his fucking mind thinking it was a banshee. Hey, thanks for the 5 tier 2 gift subs, damn right. Appreciate it. Thanks to resub Hawk Kid. Thanks for the gift sub, King Sloth. Yep, very familiar, Papa. Sure, Johnny.
In early 1959, a group of hikers decided to head out on an expedition across a mountainous region of Western Soviet Union. The group consisted of 9 experienced men and women greatly familiar.
For the record, new information about Dyatlov has surfaced over the last few months.
Would prove to be their last. Despite a criminal investigation, photographs and journal entries, the case remains unsolved after more than half a century. This is the case of Dyatlov Pass.
Hey, thanks for the 5 gift subs, Spicy Meat. Fucking tier 3 and gift subs, man. Thank you. Thanks for the gift sub licked.
In the early morning of January the 23rd, 1959, a ski and hiking team of 10 boarded a train headed for the Ural Mountains in the middle of the Soviet Union. The group consisted of 8 men and 2 women,
hey, Big T's, hope you're doing well.
Dyatlov as the group's leader. As the train slowly advanced deep into the mountainous Siberian taiga, the group diary received a final entry. I wonder what awaits us on this hike. Will anything new happen?
Oh,
over the next few days, the group continued to alternate between modes of
transportation. Red Rockstar.
First a bus, then a truck, then a horse and sleigh, and eventually they proceed on foot and skis. On January the 28th, one of the hikers named Yuri Yudin had begun to feel quite ill and eventually decided to head back, while the remaining group of 9 continued as planned. These photos were taken just before they parted ways, and it would be the last time he saw his friends alive. The group resumed their expedition across the snow-covered outback and documented everything of note using diaries as well as multiple cameras. Recovered photos and journal entries suggest that the trek progressed as one would expect, with no unforeseen complications. Just lots of snow, bitter cold, and an increasingly arduous landscape. On February the 1st, they reached the foot of a mountain known to the indigenous Mansi population as Dead Mountain.
Ooh.
They spend the better part of the day progressing up the slope and eventually decide to set up camp only a few hundred meters from the peak.
Thanks for 5 gift subs, Extinct.
These are some of the last photos recovered from the cameras, and the last sentence of the final entry reads, "It is difficult to imagine such a comfort on the ridge, with shrill, howling wind hundreds of kilometers away from human settlements."
This one shows bodies. Let me do a quick scan. I mean, I'm sure... Oh, yeah. There's a whole section called The Bodies. When we get to that chapter, I'll just go ahead and play it safe. I won't show that chapter. I'll just let you hear the audio.
A few weeks later, friends and relatives begin to worry. No one has heard from Igor or any of the other members of the group. After much debate, a team of volunteers eventually head out to find them. On February the 26th, the search party is finally able to locate the camp on the slope. It's obvious to the first at the scene that something has gone horribly wrong. The tent is in scrambles, covered by a thin coat of snow. The hikers' belongings and equipment was found orderly placed inside the tent, but the tent itself had been slashed open with a knife from the inside.
Whoa.
The next day, 9 pairs of footprints lead the search volunteers down the slope towards the nearby woods. Given that the footprints left rather mild indentations in the snow, would suggest that they descended the slope in a rather calm and orderly fashion, as opposed to running away in panic. The footprints could be tracked for about half a kilometer from the tent until the trail was completely covered by snow. So they continued in the direction of the trail and under a large cedar tree at the edge of the forest, next to the remains of an improvised campfire, they found the frozen bodies.
Alright, let's just not take any chances.
Of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonoshenko. It would take over 2 months for the bodies of all 9 hikers to be recovered. The first 2 were found severely underdressed. No jackets, no pants, no gloves, hats, boots or anything else one might expect given the frigid climate. Only light shirts, underpants and socks. At the time of their death it would have been around 30 degrees below zero. The cedar tree had signs of damage as if someone had climbed it, with branches broken up to 5 meters high. Perhaps they were attempting to locate a tent in the pitch black
I know
darkness,
XQC watched that. That's like one of the first things that comes up when you type in Dyatlov.
Or something. The next 3 hikers were found at varying distances between the tent and the tree, covered by a few centimeters of snow. They were better dressed than the previous 2, but not by much, as they still lacked essential items such as boots, hats, and gloves. They were all found facing the direction of the tent as if they were struggling to return
at the moment
I'm not
of taking
death.
a chance.
While some of them had sustained minor injuries, all 5 had died of hypothermia. It should also be noted that 4 of them had died while intoxicated. The last 4 hikers were found at the bottom of a small hill, covered by 3 meters of snow, 75 meters from the tree.
Again, a lot has come out about this over the last few months from what I remember.
3 of them had sustained lethal injuries. 1 had a fractured skull, and 2 had fractured multiple ribs and suffered massive internal bleeding. The medical examiner believed the injuries had been sustained from a fall and compared it to a car crash. The injuries had been sustained while they were all alive and could not have been inflicted by another person. 2 had also been found with gaping eye sockets, and 1 of the women had a missing tongue. The last of the 4 had a broken nose and a deformed neck, but died of hypothermia. The most mysterious of all, 3 articles of clothing were later found to be abnormally radioactive. On May the 28th, the criminal case was discontinued with a cryptic and incredibly vague conclusion.
I think
the lead investigator writes in the final report, the cause of death was an unknown compelling force which the hikers were unable...
check before I let it ride uninterrupted. Yeah, it seems to be the only time they show the bodies. Next is just campsites and stuff. Real quick though, again, I'm gonna double check, but I'm pretty sure there was a huge Dyatlov Pass breakthrough recently. Yeah. I remember it was kind of big on Reddit, so that was a couple months ago. Yeah, I believe, I won't spoil it. Well, this kind of spoils it. But yeah, you know.
To overcome. Not exactly the most satisfying answer and barely a conclusion at all. So, just in case the Galactic Empire had nothing to do with the death of the hikers, is it possible to explain some of the more enigmatic details in a less vague yet credible fashion? Let's give it a shot. The fact that Dubinina was missing her tongue has been taken way out of proportion. Some say that it was cut off or ripped out while she was still alive. Others say it was eaten by scavengers after death, while some even claim the tongue was later found somewhere else. But I've read the medical reports and this is what it says. The diaphragm of the mouth and the tongue is missing. That's it. There's nothing about cutting or ripping or anything. I don't know how or where it began, but there seems to be an exaggerated importance placed on this missing tongue, while in reality, it's a rather minor detail. At least the medical examiner believed it to be a minor detail, otherwise he would likely have elaborated further. For example, the same section of the same report states, gaping orbits, the eyeballs are absent. Equally mysterious, right? Well, no, because the medical examiner does provide an explanation for both. Soft tissue injuries to the head are post-mortem changes to Dubinina's corpse, which was recently exposed to water prior to detection. He even adds putrefaction and decomposition in parentheses to clarify exactly what he means. And this was not even exclusive to Dubinina, as the 4 last bodies were all damaged due to the melting snow. Now, some claim that her tongue must have been removed while she was still alive,
can we really rule out
and
Sasquatch?
pointed to the fact that she had about 100 grams of blood in her stomach. But that's not exactly true either. The relevant portion of the forensic examination reads, the stomach contained up to 100 cubic centimeters of a dark red, slimy mass. That's about 10 centiliters of something, most likely food, mixed with something red, most likely blood. So we don't know how much blood was in her stomach, just that there was blood in her stomach. Which isn't that strange, given that she was suffering from massive internal bleeding. One of the most mysterious aspects of this case is that 3 separate articles of clothing discovered on 2 of the bodies were found to be radioactive, which does indeed sound a bit mysterious, but you have to keep in mind that almost everything is slightly radioactive. So we need more details.
True.
The radiological studies claim that under normal circumstances, an area of 150 square centimeters should not exceed 5,000 disintegrations.
Everything is radioactive, literally everything.
Only 3 articles of clothing exceeded or equaled that limit at 5,000
They
DPM,
were fucking nuked. Yeah, that's probably what it was.
And 9,900 DPM. The only explanation given in the report is that the clothes were contaminated as radioactive dust fell from the atmosphere, or the clothes were susceptible to contamination when in contact with radioactive substances. In other words, they were unable to determine exactly how the clothes were contaminated, but it's not unrealistic to believe it to be a result of natural processes.
Not really before we made nukes, FYI.
It wasn't due to the elements. There may
Bro,
be
you're just
an
outright wrong.
explanation.
Wait, what?
Kolevatov had previously worked at a facility
You think
developing
nukes made
nuclear
radiation?
materials, and Krivonoshenko had previously worked at a top-secret plutonium production plant for nuclear weapons. And the 3 articles of radioactive clothing belonged to Kolevatov and Krivonoshenko. Around the time of the hikers' disappearance, numerous sources claim to have seen UFOs in the form of orbs of light moving across the night sky for a few seconds up to several minutes. These include 3 soldiers and 2 different hiking groups. Some witnesses also claim that the indigenous Mansi population, as well as a group of geologists, had told them that they had observed fireballs in the sky around the time of the incident. The problem with UFO sightings is that they are, well, unidentified and often unverifiable as a result.
Which means they have to be
true. One of
true.
the hiking groups reported to have seen the UFO during the night of the incident, while the other sightings occurred before or after. Then there's this. This is the very last photo taken with one of the hikers' cameras. It appears to be a photo of some type of light source taken in the middle of the night.
What if it actually is aliens?
The photo is about as undescriptive as the UFO it is claimed to depict. It could no doubt be a photo of a UFO, and it could no doubt be a photo of a candle, flashlight, fire, stove, or anything else. But let's assume that it is a photo of something in the night sky. What could it potentially be depicting? I can think of a few possibilities. A rocket, a piece of a rocket, man-made space debris during re-entry, a crashing aircraft, or perhaps a meteor. None of which would be too surprising given that this is the Soviet Union in the middle of the Cold War as well as the space race, so there would have been a lot of aerial activity. At the time when space exploration was about as fresh as a prince living in an affluent LA neighborhood, it's not surprising that people were unable to identify the mysterious lights. Regardless, it could not have landed close to the hikers as it would have been found by the search teams. And if the object had already been recovered...
Why do you keep fucking spamming this? Last story was Nightblood. Valentina had Nightblood and she didn't die from radiation. What the fuck is Nightblood? What the fuck are you talking about? Is you like a CW show or something? What is Nightblood? You've been spamming that for almost 40 minutes now since we finished that. And Valentina never died. It's actually fanfic. You have been spamming about fanfic. Is this your fanfic? Well, that was a good waste of time.
Could have been evidence in the form of a crash site, footprints and other activity on the ground. So, given the fact that there is no obvious connection between the UFO and the hiker's disappearance, I put this in the spooky red herring box. So, what happened? Why did they leave the tent? Why was it slashed open from the inside? How did some of them sustain such major injuries while the others simply succumbed to the cold? Why were so many of them underdressed?
Avalanche.
I think the biggest mystery is how it's been able to remain a mystery given the abundance of information. So after spending the better part of this month hiring multiple Russian translators, reading through a massive amount of material ranging from theories about a KGB cover-up to a simple avalanche accident, this is what I believe to be the most credible.
Let's see if he gets it right, because there is an explanation now.
First of all, why would they leave the tent? That seems to be the most important missing piece of the puzzle. I would argue that the only thing that could make them leave would have to be an immediate threat inside the tent. If something was outside, such as an animal or a UFO, then there would be no reason to cut the tent open. There were no signs of an avalanche, however, they could have escaped believing an avalanche was tumbling towards them. The problem with that theory is that the footprints show them walking in a calm and orderly manner down the slope, as opposed to running away in panic. So something caused them to panic inside the tent, but once outside, they calmed down and made a conscious decision to walk down the slope. Now, take a look at this photo. The pipe sticking out of the tent entrance is the exhaust pipe of the internal stove. This was a completely unique and homemade design, as the leader of the group had built the stove himself. We know they had used the stove on the night of the incident before the incident took place, as partially eaten pieces of fried ham and bacon were found inside the tent. I think that after disassembling the stove and removing the exhaust pipe, the embers inside the stove were accidentally reignited. If the exhaust pipe had been removed, the smoke would have filled the tent in seconds. As they attempted to get control of the flame, they cut a few holes at the top of the tent to vent the smoke.
Damn, this guy's a
That
genius.
didn't work, and it became increasingly difficult to breathe. The side of the tent was slashed open, and they all escaped in a state of panic. There's even more evidence to support this theory. Several members of the group were found with burn marks on both their bodies and
hold on, just in case they show bodies, not gonna risk it.
Which could definitely have been a result of the improvised fire under the tree, or perhaps a scalding hot metal stove. Some of them were also found with blood around their mouth, and coughing up blood could be a symptom of smoke inhalation. Then there's this photo, taken the day before the incident. The jacket has obviously been burned, but the question is how? It's possible that sparks from the stove had accidentally set the jacket aflame. Okay, so they make it outside and quickly realize what a terrible situation they're in. Sub-zero temperatures, no shelter, underdressed, in the middle of a snowstorm, in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. At this point, I think one or more of them made a decision to head for the nearest shelter, which they would have known to be the woods. The reasoning behind this decision is likely multifaceted. The smoke from the tent could have made it impossible to stay within its proximity, and/or the smoke may have caused them to believe that the tent was on fire. Some of them were intoxicated, which could have affected their judgment as well as their sensibility to the cold. And they may also have believed to be closer to the woods than they actually were. So they finally reached the woods and immediately set out to make a fire. Some climbed a tree and scavenged the surrounding area, while those who are more properly dressed head a bit deeper into the woods. About 75 meters from the tree, 4 of them trigger a minor avalanche, taking them over the edge of a ravine with a drop of about 3 meters. As the bottom is filled with rocks and ice, they sustain lethal injuries. 3 of the other 5 hikers decide to head back for the tent, while the remaining 2 slowly freeze to death around a fading flame.
So, that theory makes a ton of sense, and I haven't kept up with the Dyatlov discoveries here, but Like I said, I remembered recently there was a huge resurgence in information and explanations for this, so let me just check to make sure there's no pictures of bodies. I just ripped some good ass in case you heard that. Okay, this looks good. So this comes from Smithsonian Mag. Thanks to the resub raw. Can't say I've done that before, dried pickle. Thanks to the resub bravo. Alright, let's see. This is just an overview. Oh, here we go. An abominable snowman attack. That seems like a cool theory. We do not claim to have solved the Dyatlov Pass mystery, as no one survived to tell the story. That's just what a man who solved the mystery would say, being very coy. But we show the plausibility of the avalanche hypothesis. An avalanche, a snow slab, or a hurricane. Thanks to Tier 1 Zion and Prime Huso. Official findings suggested a torrent of snow slabs or blocky chunks surprised the sleeping victims and pushed them to seek shelter at a nearby ridge. Unable to see more than 50 feet ahead, the hikers froze to death as they attempted to make their way back to their tent. Critics of the slab avalanche theory cite four main counter-arguments: the lack of physical traces of an avalanche, more than 9-hour gap between the hikers building their camp, a process that required cutting into the mountain to form a barrier against the wind, and their panicked departure, the shallow slope of the campsite, and the traumatic injuries sustained by the group. Asphyxiation is more common cause of death for avalanche victims. Okay. So this guy proved that a snow slab could have wiped through the area without leaving many traces. A slab avalanche, excuse me. Alright. Jesus, they really went in on this. Got a whole little fucking graph. Well, not graph. A whole little picture. Researchers unraveled the final piece of the puzzle, the hikers' unexplained injuries, with the help of a surprising source, Disney's 2013 film Frozen. I'm starting to doubt how accurate this conclusion may be. If Elsa did it, but I'll continue. He was so impressed by the movie's depiction of snow that he asked his creators to share their animation code with him. This simulation tool, coupled with data from cadaver tests conducted by General Motors in 1970 to determine what would happen to the human body when struck at different speeds, enabled the pair to show that heavy blocks of solid snow could have landed on the hikers as they slept, crushing their bones and causing injuries not typically associated with avalanches. If this was the case, the pair posits those who had sustained less serious blows likely dragged their injured companions out of the tent in the hopes of saving their lives. Okay. Next, the resub remark. The slabs of snow would have had to be incredibly stiff and moving at a significant speed to inflict such violent injuries. He adds that the research doesn't explain why these people, after being hit by an avalanche, ran off without their clothes into the snow. True. If you're in that type of harsh environment, it's suicide to leave shelter without your clothes on. True. For people to do that, they must have been terrified by something, and I assume one of the most likely things is one of them went crazy for some reason. Can't understand why else they would have behaved in that way unless they were trying to flee from someone who's been tracking them. I mean, yeah, I guess that really wasn't as conclusive as I thought it would be. Thanks to Prime Darko and Resub Prime. Oh, DB Cooper. Yes, I didn't even think of that. Maybe it was DB Cooper. Don't know if I've seen that one yet either, To be honest, Lamino's theory actually sounds more plausible. This, I'm doubting that one now. Let me just double check there's no bodies here. Now I'm interested. Yeah, no bodies. Is it not just hypothermic psychosis? Well, no, because it all happened while they were in their tents warm, supposedly. They cut out of the tent and all took off into the night. They wouldn't be suffering from hypothermia inside with a stove and clothing and everything. That really wouldn't add up. Oh no, this one also talks about slab avalanche. And it also cites Frozen. Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? That is very interesting. Very interesting indeed.